Ian Rapoport recently revealed the plans for the New Orleans Saints offseason rebuild. And before we dive into all of that, I just got to ask you this question. What are your thoughts on the Saints rebuilding? Who do they need to hire? What all needs to be taken care of? What is your biggest priority? I want you to get down in the comments section and play GM for me. Like I said right off the top of this video, Rapsheet has revealed the New Orleans Saints offseason plan in terms of their rebuild. And you want to know what's going to happen? They are not planning on rebuilding. And this article actually came out right before that Saints first Falcons game where New Orleans was able to take down the Dirty Birds at home, which, by the way, for the record, happy Victory Monday. Like the video to celebrate. It's been a while since we've gotten to do one of these. But I want to kick it over to Ian Rapoport because I think it's very telling in terms of what to expect and how the New Orleans Saints view themselves internally. Rapsheet saying that New Orleans isn't planning for an overhaul. There will be changes and likely an effort to get younger, but they aren't envisioning taking their franchise down to the studs, just like they didn't plan a fire sale prior to this past Tuesday's trade deadline. With the roster they believe is far better than their record, one besieged by unrelenting injuries, the Saints believe in pushing forward rather than stepping back. And in my personal opinion, there's no question about it. If this roster is much healthier, if this roster has some of these key players back from injury, or you don't lose some of these players to the injured reserve list, I think the Saints would have a better record. There's no question about it. When you lose a player of Eric McCoy's caliber, your offensive line is going to suffer, especially because you have to move players around where they haven't been preparing all offseason, and then that puts a wrench into things. And not to mention, with the wide receiver groups, you have Jermaine Jackson, Mason Tipton, Dante Pettis, and then Marquez Valdez-Scantling coming up with catches. Like, shout out MVS. Nobody else on this depth chart has been drafted in the last 3 years, because look at who is on injured reserve right now. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Bub Means. Your top three wide receivers. Cedric Wilson, shout out to him, I guess, as well, but he's been missing time due to injuries as well. If you don't lose Derek Carr to injury, if you don't lose Shane Lemieux, if you don't lose Will Harris, if you get some of these players back and they don't miss time, then I do believe that this is a much healthier roster. But health is one concern. I know a lot of you guys are more focused on, look, we have an old roster, but I'm here to tell you to mellow out, baby. The average age on the New Orleans Saints roster is 26 years old, 9 months, and 12 days, which ranks across the league 16th. The Bills are the oldest roster with an age of 27 years, 5 months, and 29 days. The Packers are the youngest at 25 years, 7 months, and 25 days. And the Chiefs, they rank 25th at 26 years old, 3 months, and 9 days. So the New Orleans Saints are not very far off from being at where most quality teams are in terms of their age bracket. Obviously, the Bills are really talented and they're winning a lot of football games, but hey, they're an old roster. I don't want to hear the excuse that an old roster can't win football games. So I'm here to tell you to mellow out. And if you want to learn more about Mellow Seltzer, feel free to hit me up on X to learn more. Now, I want to just encourage you to subscribe right now because no doubt this is going to be a very, very busy offseason. And it's also going to be an extremely important offseason for the Black and Gold. So if you want to stay informed, if you don't want to miss a thing, whether it's updates, whether it's buzz, anything in between, I need you to subscribe. Just want to say also, thank you for helping us cross the 38,000 milestone. Road to 40K, we're on the way. So hit that sub button right now if you're a diehard Saints fan. Let's kick it back over to Ian Rapoport. He's adding some more context, saying after speaking to sources informed of the Saints' thinking, there are several factors that point to a retooling rather than a full rebuild. That would entail embracing a long process of collecting draft picks and losing in order to build it back up. And I'm here to tell you right now, philosophically, the New Orleans Saints do not believe in blowing it up. And I'm also going to tell you, teams don't intentionally lose. If you want to say go tank, you can say that all you want. but players' livelihoods are at stake. They have families to take care of. They have mouths to feed. They have rent to pay, just like you and I. So an NFL player is not going to go and intentionally lose football games. So tanking, not really in the discussion. But I will say this. There's also not that much evidence in terms of and rebuilding and blowing it all up, new GM, new head coach, how many times has that actually worked in the short term, or in the long term? Like, look at the Browns, look at the Jags. Outside of the Lions and the Texans right now, there are a lot of teams that have traditionally been bad that have stayed bad. The Eagles are the most recent example of, in 2020, they won a Super Bowl, blew it all up, got back to, restructured, rebuilt everything, and that's an anomaly. Like, bad teams continue to rebuild. Bad teams continue to stay bad. And in my personal opinion, I don't think blowing it up all the way makes a ton of sense. But I do think when it comes to the decision-making and how things are gone about, that definitely could be updated. It definitely could be revised, and it could be improved, no doubt about it. And the New Orleans Saints were also very impressive the first 2 weeks. There's no doubt. They were statistically one of the best offenses in the last handful of years. They were also statistically the best offense this season. They were statistically one of the best defenses go through those first 2 weeks. And honestly, even going into week 3 after that loss to the Eagles, they were still putting up solid numbers. And then everything else kind of started to decrease. Injuries and bad things started happening. It got out of hand very quickly. So I don't think that the New Orleans Saints are going to blow things up. I don't think they're going to get a new GM. I don't think they're going to try and do a ton of new stuff. But stacking draft picks, getting a younger roster, trying to bring in young quality talent, absolutely, especially considering it's cheap. You do that, you fix some of the other issues like the issues in your wallet. Now, Ian Rapoport also adding this, depth must improve to withstand injuries. But in the minds of the decision makers, that start was proof that there is a core there worth keeping together. And that kind of just backs up my point that obviously the New Orleans Saints aren't going to be looking to just blow everything up. And they were impressive those first 2 weeks. The decision makers think that. Ian Rapoport's reporting it. Nick Underhill is even reporting that. And I do believe that the New Orleans Saints can fix a lot of issues if you have one outstanding offseason. If you just hit home runs on your head coach hire, you hit home runs on multiple draft picks. If you have anything reminiscent of the 2017 draft class and you may have a good head coach and you figure out your quarterback situation, I'm telling you right now, things are looking very good for the future. But that does entail a lot of good decisions being made, and traditionally and recently speaking, we haven't seen a lot of those be made by the current decision makers. And that has led us to be about $60 million over the cap in 2025. After Alvin Kamara's restructure, the New Orleans Saints were able to clear up some money. And on top of that, with the increase of the salary cap every single year, the projected number is about $60 million over the cap. But they can actually get cap compliant like that. Just a few simple moves. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Cam Jordan's going to retire. I don't think he will. If you just restructure his contract, you actually save $9 million. But if he does retire, you get $11 million off the books. Ryan Ramczyk, I do believe he's going to retire. So you can get $18 million off the books right there. Derek Carr, you restructure him, $30 million off the books. Eric McCoy, you restructure him, $5.5 million off the books for a grand total of $64.5 million of savings. Now, we go back real quick. $60 million over the cap, $64 million in savings. You have $4.5 million to spend. Not a lot of money to spend, but you have money to spend just on 4 simple moves right here. And the big question that the New Orleans Saints have to ask themselves, do they want to restructure Derek Carr again? That is the big thing. Because if the New Orleans Saints don't want to restructure him, they're going to have to take on some cap. They're going to have to take on a cap hit. They're going to have some dead money, but then they'll also have savings. But if they don't want to, then they'll have him around, and you'll have a experienced quarterback that's a veteran that knows how to play in the league and everything. And so in terms of whether or not it makes sense to cut Derek Carr, it's kind of up to the decision makers. And I know a lot of you guys at home probably don't want Derek Carr around for too much longer. But I'm here to tell you, if you do cut him, you actually probably save some considerable amount of money. So in 2025, the savings, if you were to cut him pre-June 1st, I crunched the numbers, I did the math. This is about as accurate as I can possibly imagine it to be. $11.3 million, give or take, if it's a pre-June 1st cut. In 2025, if it's a post-June cut, you save $40 million in cap space. So my point being, there are ways that you can move things around. There's ways you can get around this. And the New Orleans Saints, although it would be expensive and you're losing money, you're also saving money. So that's kind of where I want to give it to you. And that's where I want to have y'all weigh in. What would you do with Derek Carr? Would you cut him and just take the cap hit, have some savings, move on, and roll the dice with a young quarterback, whether it's Haener, whether it's Rattler, whether it's a player that you draft? Or do you want to try and restructure him, see if you can make something happen next year, clear up some money, and, try and stay at least somewhat competitive? I do think right now, I will say this, I think the New Orleans Saints might, I'm saying might, I'm not saying they will be, I'm saying they might be more competitive with Derek Carr as the quarterback. I'm not sold on Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler being 100% ready to start quite yet. That being said, there's a long offseason, a lot of development can happen and all that kind of stuff. But I just got to ask you, there's high risk, high reward on both arguments of this. What would you do with Derek Carr? Rapsheet continuing to add context. And I think this is one of the more telling quotes that came from this entire article. The Saints pushed money forward when Breeze was in his prime. Still had a window to win their division after he retired. They dealt with COVID and never quite reset. They believe that window is still open and that the talent is there. So no, rebuilding is not in the plans for New Orleans. And you guys might not like it. You guys might not agree with it. But what I will tell you about this, you got to give New Orleans credit. They will do everything in their power to convince themselves that they can still compete and that they are a quality football team. I'll tell you right now, this offseason will make or break the New Orleans Saints for the foreseeable future, at least over the next handful of years. If everything goes well, good head coach, great draft class, a quarterback, Derek Carr starts putting things together. If all of the things and all the dominoes fall in the right direction, the Saints fast-track to rebuild like crazy, and they are way ahead of schedule. But if things go poorly, you're talking about possibly getting a new GM in the future. You're talking about another quarterback change, another head coaching change. You're talking about more draft picks, trading away more players. And this is just where things can start getting out of hand, and you can start going down a negative spiral and have a bad snowball effect. Now, in terms of this offseason, reports from Nick Underhill do not expect any changes around Mickey Loomis this offseason. That is coming from Nick. That's not coming from me. I'm just here to tell you you shouldn't expect it. And I'm also here to tell you, look, if Mickey Loomis can do well this offseason, fine. He can stick around another year. But if this is my last straw with Mickey. This right here, the remainder of this season, the offseason in 2025, that is it. If things go poorly, I want him gone. I don't want to deal with them anymore. I'm over it. We need a new GM. But if they stay competitive and they stay winning and they stay a quality football team, unlike they've looked this year, again, injuries have decimated it. A lot of things have happened, but they're not going to rebuild. They're just simply not. They don't see the need to do it, and that's the take. That's how it's going to happen. My take, I don't know if I agree with it. I think that the Saints should be more open to it, but it's also not we have to acknowledge the fact. Yeah, this team is very beat up. They did play really well when they had a very healthy roster. Panthers and Cowboys, obviously not that good of football teams. That being said, yeah, it's a whole thing. We could honestly have done an hour-long video for this one. But it's going to be a busy offseason, so friendly reminder to subscribe to the channel. We'll be live on Wednesday. We'll be live on game day once again. So shout out to all of y'all for paying attention and tuning in to today's show. Y'all stay golden. We'll see you next time.